Iraq as a member of the 82nd Airborne Division. And so within the first 100 days of this Congress, as you mentioned, when we took the steps to say we are going to be co-equal branches of government. See, when I was at West Point, I taught constitutional law, and I taught about what this country was all about. It was that we have three co-equal branches of government. See, we didn't believe in a theory of King George and one person being infallible running a country. And that's why we had the American Revolution. And our democracy's evolved over 200 years to now today, when we have leaders from both parties willing to stand up and say enough is enough. Mr. President, we will not continue to give you a blank check while the Iraqis still sit on the sidelines. We will not sit there and say everything's okay when we understand what the truth is on the ground in Iraq. When I was there in 2003, I remember when it was August. I remember having the combat gear on. I remember riding up and down what's called Ambush Alley in 130-degree heat and wondering when that next roadside bomb might go off. Scouting it out, looking, always being vigilant to make sure that the men that I was leading down that path were safe. Now, what this 110th Congress has stood up to do, and what I'm so proud of the freshman class to do, is that when we had the emergency supplemental, the Iraq supplemental, we said we will give you, Mr. President, every single dime, every single penny that you asked for to support the troops. But there is a policy attached. No longer is there an open-ended commitment. No longer is there unaccountability. This is a different Congress. This is the 110th Congress. This is a Congress that will stand strong, stand together, even though we know the political attacks are going to come, even though we know it takes personal courage, and even though they're going to try and distort what we're actually trying to do. And what we're trying to do is to hold the Iraqi people accountable, now over 4 years later. At 6:12 a.m. this morning, I got an email from Iraq. It was from a former cadet that I got to know who lost his brother 9/11. And he said to me, he said, "Sir, this is the first time I've ever written you." He said, "But I want you to know there are legions of junior officers, now company commanders in Iraq and in Afghanistan and all over this country, that are watching you, that are watching this 110th Congress, and that are saying, thank God someone is standing up and speaking truth to power." He said, "I would never think that 5 years after my brother was murdered at the World Trade Center, 9/11 of 2001, that I would stand up against the policy, the foreign policy of the United States of America when it comes to Iraq. I want you to know that I am keeping you in my prayers, and if there's anything I can do to help your cause, to put our country back on the right track, I'm there." That's what's happening in all these congresspersons here in Washington. When I get letters from people in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, or Northeast Philadelphia, and they say, thank God we have a congressman that's going to stand up for us, for our veterans. Thank God that they're speaking truth to power. That's what's going on. There is a movement. And it's a movement, again, to believe in America. A movement, again, to say, listen, we understand there's co-equal branches of government. We understand what the Congress is trying to do. We understand that they're trying to do what is right. And it's not about partisan politics. It's not about Bush Republicans versus Democrats. It's not about that. You know, I joke. My wife, Jenny, is at home. I just talked to her on the phone. My 4-month-old daughter, Maggie, just laughed for the first time today. It puts it all in perspective. But my wife was a lifelong Republican. She considers herself Republican. And she said to me when we first met, and she gave me a hard time for being a Democrat, she said, "You know, Patrick, I'll support you, and I'll support you for one reason and one reason only, beside, the fact that I'm in love with you." She said, I was a YAFRA. It's called a Young American for Freedom. It's a conservative wing of the Republican Party. And she said, the Republican Party left me. I did not leave the Republican Party. And so when I talk about what we've done, what we've accomplished in the supplemental bill, against all odds, Because we remember, we were through this when we were voting for it. We understood when they said, why are you wasting your time trying to pass this emergency supplemental, putting a timeline on Iraq? Why would you do that? You know it's not going to pass. And I was there, and I was talking to press, and I said, I give every fiber of my being to talk to my colleagues together, all of us as one, and say how important it is to pass this. And then when we passed it against all the odds, when they told us it wasn't going to happen, and we passed it, then they said, well, why'd you do that? The Senate's never going to pass it. And the Senate responded, and the Senate took our bill, and now it's in conference, and they passed also a supplemental bill with the timeline. And that's why it's so important that all of us do not lose hope. All of us continue to stand up and speak truth to power. All of us stand up and say, no longer are we just going to have an open-ended commitment in Iraq. Because when you look at the full spectrum, some people say, bring all the troops home tomorrow, we don't care, just bring them all home tomorrow. Others say, it's the president, he's infallible, you can't ask any tough questions, you can't give him a timeline, you can't demand accountability from the Iraqis who are still sitting on the sidelines 4 years later. But this 110th Congress, made up of all races, of all sexes, of all parties, came together and we said, this is a moderate approach, this is an approach that will change the direction in Iraq. When we look at how almost every day hundreds of people are dying there. And we said to the Iraqi people that we will support you, but we will not sit idly by. We will not stand idly by and watch you continue to sit on the sidelines when our troops, our men and women who wear the military uniform of our country, continue to lead the efforts there. When now it's 4 years later, and it's imperative that they stand up for their country. Because if we remember, when it was the American Revolution, it was America's revolution. It was the Americans standing up. When it was the American Civil War, it was the Americans fighting each other. So that's why all of us in good conscience cannot stand there, why our brave men and women, places like Iraq, and referee a religious civil war. That is not what they were supposed to do. That is not in the national interest of the United States of America. That will not keep our families safe. And when we all vote, when we all take these so important and these crucial votes, and these timely votes, and these historic votes, when we vote for our families and for our constituents, we think about how is it going to affect our children and our children's children. How is it going to affect my daughter, Maggie Murphy, when she reads in the history books what we've done? How is it going to affect what we call Joe, you know, that G.I. Joe, that soldier in the ground in 138-degree heat in Baghdad? Those members of the 82nd Airborne Division that I so proudly served with that are now back over there on their third deployment. And when I was there weeks ago, and I know some of my colleagues here were also just recently there, you know, I talked to these guys. I talked to the guys I served with. I talked to guys like Sergeant Juan Santiago, who left his wife and 2 kids at home, is now on his third deployment in Iraq. And I broke bread with him over there. I said to him I was in Baghdad. He used to be Private Santiago, now he's Sergeant Santiago. And his nickname is Santi. And I had lunch with him. I said, Santi, what's going on? And he said, sir, it's like Groundhog Day. But 4 years later, they're still sitting on the sidelines. We're still doing everything for them. I don't know what it's going to take to get them to come off the sideline. And what it's going to take is a political pressure so we are clear and we act as one. That we tell the Iraqis that the 110th Congress is different. That the spirit of America is there and we love you. But we cannot hold your hand. You need to stand up finally for your country. You need to stand up and secure your neighborhoods. Secure your street corners. You need to be the ones that are leading those convoys up and down ambush alleys, not our troops. And that's exactly what our supplemental did and what we will do when we on it after it comes back from conference in just a few days. With that, I would now take it back probably to Mr. Klein from Florida. Thank you.